Have you ever imagined walking through a completely empty village, where houses still have dust-covered furniture, schools have books forgotten on desks, and it seems as if everyone has simply disappeared without a trace? It's a strange, almost suffocating feeling, as if time has frozen at a specific moment, and you are the only intruder in that unsettling silence. In northern Ontario, in the icy depths of Canada, there are abandoned villages that carry this heavy atmosphere, but with a detail that goes beyond common abandonment. These places were left behind decades ago, sometimes almost a century ago. But here's the problem that no one can explain. Locals, urban explorers, and even staunch skeptics swear that these villages were never truly empty. Lights appear in the windows of houses without electricity. Footprints emerge fresh in the snow, even when no one should be there. Voices echo through streets where no living being remains. Whispers that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Have you ever experienced something like this? That inexplicable feeling of being watched, even when completely alone? Well, that's exactly what happens in these haunted places in northern Canada, where the past refuses to die and memories seem to take on a life of their own when darkness falls on the snow-covered ruins. Today, we're going to explore together 5 abandoned villages in northern Ontario that defy any logical or rational explanation. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover in the last one might make you completely rethink what really happens when a place is left behind. Let's start with the first village, where something very strange happens over time. But before we dive into these stories that will keep you up all night, I need to ask you something. If you're fascinated by abandoned places, unexplained mysteries, and stories that stir something deep within us, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who are also passionate about real stories that seem like fiction. Every like, every comment, every new subscription shows me that it's worth continuing to delve into these forgotten places and bring these narratives to you. It's this connection between us that keeps the flame of curiosity and mystery alive. Now, let's get down to business. Prepare your mind for what's coming next, because the first village on this list will show you that time sometimes simply refuses to move on. Village 1, Benny, the railway village, where the clocks stopped at 3:17. Benny. That's the name of the place whose story we're about to tell you. A small railway village that briefly existed between 1912 and 1927, nestled in the icy depths of northern Ontario along the transcontinental line that cut across the country. It was one of those places born out of necessity. You know, when the railway needed stopping points, rest areas, and supply points, Benny emerged like that, like so many other villages that sprouted along the tracks like mushrooms after the rain. But when the railway changed its route in 1927, deciding to take a different path through the mountains and forests, the residents simply abandoned everything and left. They left their homes, their furniture, their memories, and followed the path of progress that now passed through another place. The transformation was quick and brutal. One day Benny was alive, full of voices and movement. The next, it was just another forgotten ghost on the map of Canada. But here's the detail that will make you question everything you know about coincidences and chance. When the first urban explorers began visiting the ruins of Benny decades later, they discovered something absolutely bizarre. All the clocks found in the abandoned houses were stopped at exactly the same time, 3:17 in the morning. All of them. Didn't matter if they were wall clocks, table clocks, or pocket clocks. They all showed 3:17. Now, you might think this is just a strange coincidence. Perhaps some natural event that happened at that specific moment, a power outage or something like that. But that's where the story gets really disturbing, because it's not just about the old clocks, it's about what happens today, right now, when you visit this place. Explorers who reach the ruins of Benny report an experience that defies any logical explanation. Their own watches, both analog and digital, simply stop working when they enter the village, and they don't stop at any random time. They stop exactly at 3:17, always, without exception. Some manage to get their watches working again as soon as they leave the perimeter of the ruins, as if crossing an invisible barrier that separates normal time from Benny's frozen time. Others never manage to get their devices working again, and need to completely replace batteries, gears, and electronic circuits. It's as if something in that place sucks the very essence of time and keeps it trapped in a single eternal moment. The hidden truth behind this temporal anomaly is even darker. There's a recurring story among those who have dared to spend the night near Benny. They speak of a shadowy figure walking along the abandoned tracks at precisely 3:17 a.m. Witnesses always describe the same scene, with eerily consistent details. A man wearing a railroad uniform from that era, carrying an old lantern that sways gently as he walks with slow, deliberate steps along the rust-covered, vegetation-covered tracks. But when you try to approach this figure, when you try to call out to him or shine your lantern on him, he simply vanishes, like smoke, as if he had never been there. Some say he's searching for a train that will never arrive, a ghost train that should have passed by that dawn in 1927 but took a different route, leaving him behind, waiting eternally. Others believe he died at that exact time, perhaps in some terrible accident involving the railroad, and is now trapped in an infinite loop, reliving his last moments repeatedly, night after night, never finding rest or liberation. The emotional impact of witnessing this apparition is devastating. People who consider themselves skeptics, who never believed in anything supernatural, leave Benny completely transformed, questioning everything they thought they knew about reality. And the most terrifying thing of all, this isn't just folklore or a story passed down by word of mouth. Researchers and paranormal investigators installed trail cameras in the ruins of Benny, those modern devices with motion sensors and night vision that capture any activity in the forest. And these cameras captured the figure. Night after night, the same silhouette appears in the recordings, walking along the trails, always in the same place, always at the same time, always alone. The image quality isn't perfect, but it's enough to see that there's something there, something that shouldn't exist, something that challenges our most basic notions about life, death, and the passage of time. Benny isn't just an abandoned village, it's a place where time literally died and refused to move on. It's a window to something we don't understand, a crack in reality through which we can glimpse that there is much more between heaven and earth than our philosophy can explain. And if you think this story is disturbing enough, wait until you meet the next place on our journey. Comment below. Time stopped if this story gave you chills. Village 2, Burkel Lake, the mining village, where children still play. What I'm about to tell you will stir something even deeper within you, because it involves the purest and most innocent sound there is, children's laughter. But when that laughter echoes in a place where no one should have lived for over 70 years, innocence transforms into something completely different. Let's go to Burkel Lake, a mining village built in the 1930s in the remote depths of northern Ontario, erected specifically to house the workers and their families who came in search of the golden dream. Literally, the Burkel gold mine promised wealth, stability, a bright future for those who risked everything to start a new life in that isolated place. For almost 2 decades, the village prospered. Children ran through the dirt streets, played in the trees around the wooden houses, and attended the small school that the community had built with such pride. It was a piece of civilization nestled in the middle of the wilderness. But as with so many mining town stories, the dream ended when the gold ran out. In the 1950s, when the veins dried up and there was nothing left to extract from that land, the decision was made quickly. The mine closed. The families had to leave. There was no choice, no alternative. Without the mine, there was no reason for Burkel Lake to exist, and so everyone left, carrying what they could, leaving behind everything that was too heavy to transport along the precarious roads that cut through the forest. But here is the revelation that transforms this common ghost town story into something that will make you question the very nature of reality. According to local accounts passed down through generations, not everyone left, or rather, not all souls managed to truly leave Burkel Lake behind. Urban explorers who visit the ruins of this abandoned village frequently report the same unsettling experience. They hear children's laughter echoing through the forest, not distant or muffled laughter that you might mistake for the wind or animals. Clear, crisp, unmistakable laughter, the sound of children playing, having fun, experiencing those moments of pure joy that only childhood knows. But when you try to follow the sound, when you move in the direction from which the laughter seems to come, it stops abruptly, and then it starts again somewhere else, as if the children were playing hide-and-seek with you, running between the trees and the ruined houses. Some visitors saw something even more disconcerting: swings hanging from the trees, those simple swings made of rope and wooden planks that families built for their children decades ago, moving on their own, swinging back and forth with a steady rhythm, as if invisible children were playing on them. And this happens even on completely windless days, when the leaves on the trees are still and the air is heavy and stagnant. The psychological impact of witnessing something like this is immense. To see a swing moving on its own, knowing that real children played there 70 years ago, children who grew up or died, but whose presence seems to still inhabit that space. But the most unsettling thing of all is inside the old Burkel Lake School. The building still stands, though deteriorated by time and the brutal winters that plagued that region. When you enter, you find a scene frozen in time. Chalk is scattered on the floor, as if the children had just left for the playground. The wooden desks are still lined up, some tipped over, others intact, and on the walls, somehow mysteriously preserved by the dryness of the environment, are children's drawings. Simple, innocent drawings made with colored chalk, houses, trees, families, smiling suns. But here's the detail that will send a chill down your spine. According to several visitors who returned to the school at different times, these drawings seem to change position between visits. New drawings appear, others disappear. Some become more elaborate, as if invisible hands continued working on them overnight. The hidden truth behind these phenomena was captured in a terrifying recording, made by a group of adventurers who spent the night at Burkel Lake in 2020. They settled into one of the least dilapidated houses, prepared their sleeping bags, and set up recording equipment. During the early morning hours, their microphones picked up something none of them were prepared to hear: the unmistakable sound of footsteps running across the second floor of the house. Light, quick steps, like children playing tag. The problem: that second floor no longer had a floor. The boards had rotted and fallen years ago, leaving only the exposed beams. There was no surface for anyone to walk on, much less run. But the footsteps continued, clear in the recording, defying any possible physical explanation. When they mustered the courage to climb up and investigate with their flashlights, carefully illuminating the exposed beams, they found something that made them run away from Burkel Lake before dawn. Tiny footprints in the dust covering the beams, footprints of barefoot children, multiple, going in various directions, as if several children had been there recently, playing in that impossible space where no living human being could be without falling into the void. The theory circulating among the oldest residents of the nearby towns is devastating in its tragic simplicity. They believe that the families who lost everything when the mine closed, who saw their dreams and hopes crumble along with the village's economy, never truly left completely. Their bodies may have left Burkel Lake, but something remained, and the children, those innocent souls who didn't understand why they had to abandon the only home they knew, are still there, trapped in an endless loop of never-ending play, eternally reliving those happy days before the mine closed, before everything fell apart. Write this down. They still play if you felt the weight of this story. Village 3, Jackfish, the city frozen in time. There's a different kind of abandonment I'm going to introduce you to now, and it's perhaps the most disturbing of all. It's not chaotic abandonment, with furniture scattered and signs of a hasty escape. It's organized, meticulous abandonment, as if people had simply left for work on an ordinary morning and decided never to return. Jackfish sits on the shores of Lake Superior, one of Canada's most impressive and imposing Great Lakes, with waters so vast they resemble an ocean more than a lake. And there, on that rocky shore battered by icy waves, grew a thriving railroad town that flourished until the 1960s. It was one of those strategic locations, a vital point on the transcontinental route, where trains stopped, refueled, and changed crews. Jackfish had everything a small town needs: well-built houses, a beautiful church, shops, schools, a strong community united by work, and the hard but dignified life of that isolated region. The transformation of Jackfish from a thriving town to a ghost town happened differently from the others we explored. It wasn't the depletion of natural resources, like in Burkel Lake, nor a sudden change like in Benny. It was a cold, calculated corporate decision. The railroad decided to change its route, to chart a more efficient path through the mountains, and when that happened, Jackfish simply lost its reason for existing. Families received the news, packed their bags, organized their lives with the efficiency of those who had no choice, and left. But here's the detail that makes Jackfish unique among all the ghost towns that exist. Unlike other places, it remained completely intact. The houses still have curtains hanging from the windows, swaying gently when the wind blows through the cracks. The church still has perfectly aligned wooden pews, as if the congregation were about to arrive at any moment for Sunday service. It's as if everyone had left for work on an ordinary morning in 1964 and simply decided never to return. This strange preservation creates a unique and unsettling atmosphere. When you walk through the empty streets of Jackfish during the day, the feeling isn't one of ruin or destruction. It's one of pause, as if time has been put on hold, waiting for someone to press the play button so that life can flow again. You look out the windows and almost expect to see faces watching you back. You pass the church and your brain insists there should be voices singing hymns inside. It's a profound cognitive disconnect between what your eyes see and what your mind knows to be true. But the real revelation about Jackfish only happens when night falls on Lake Superior. Fishermen camping near the village, drawn by the waters rich in trout and salmon, report phenomena they cannot rationally explain. They see lights turning on and off in the empty houses, a regular and deliberate pattern, as if someone were moving from room to room, turning on lamps that shouldn't have had electricity for over 60 years. Some hear the unmistakable sound of doors slamming, that characteristic slam of heavy wooden doors closing forcefully. The problem, often this happens on completely calm nights, when there is no wind blowing from the lake, when the air is heavy and still like stagnant water. The psychological impact of witnessing these phenomena is profound. Experienced fishermen, men and women who have spent their entire lives in remote and isolated places, who are not frightened by darkness or solitude, leave Jackfish disturbed in a way they have never experienced before. They speak of a presence, of something watching from behind the scenes, something that doesn't necessarily want to hurt, but definitely doesn't want to be forgotten. It's as if the town is somehow alive, maintaining a ghostly routine that echoes the days when it was inhabited by real people of flesh and blood. But there is one particularly disturbing account that crystallizes all the strangeness of Jackfish into a single terrifying moment. In 2015, a couple of urban explorers were investigating the abandoned church, admiring how it remained preserved despite decades of neglect. They were taking photos, documenting the architectural details, when suddenly they heard something that froze them in place. The church organ began to play. It wasn't a random note caused by some animal or expanding wood. It was a recognizable melody, a religious hymn being played with both hands, with technique and intention. They ran out of the church in utter panic, their hearts pounding so hard they almost ached. And when they finally mustered the courage to look back through the open door, they saw a silhouette sitting on the organ bench, its back to them, completely still except for the movements of its hands on the keys. Their decision was to run away, to get as far away as possible from that impossible sight. But human curiosity is a powerful force, and after a few minutes breathing the icy lake air, trying to process what they had just witnessed, they returned. They went back into the church, their legs trembling but determined to understand what had happened, and there was no one there. The organ bench was empty. The church was in absolute silence. It was as if nothing had happened, as if those terrifying minutes were just a shared nightmare. The rational explanation skeptics offer. Strong winds from Lake Superior can create strange sound effects, make doors bang, create optical illusions with fog and light. But those who have been to Jackfish, who have spent real time in that place and felt its peculiar energy, swear that it's not just that. They say with absolute conviction that Jackfish wasn't just abandoned in a physical sense. It was left behind in another sense, deeper and more disturbing. It was left with its inhabitants still there, not in body, but in essence, in memory, in presence, as if the city itself refused to accept that it was forgotten, and kept alive the routine of decades ago, through manifestations that defy everything we think we know about life and death. Comment below. Jackfish lives, if this story moved you. Village for Poupore, the lumber town where nobody can sleep, but if you think you've heard the worst, I need to take you to a place where the very idea of rest becomes impossible. We're talking about Poupore, a logging camp built in the 1930s deep in the remote forests of northern Ontario. So far from civilization that isolation itself was part of the daily challenge. Hundreds of workers lived there with their families, tough men forged by the brutal work of cutting down gigantic trees that took centuries to grow. It was a hard, dangerous life, but there was pride in it. These men were literally building the country, providing the timber that would become houses, furniture, paper, all the infrastructure of a growing nation. Poupore thrived for almost 2 decades, a constant cycle of hard work and well-deserved rest. Then came the winter of 1954, and this winter was unlike any other. It was particularly brutal, with temperatures dropping so low that the air burned your lungs when you breathed. Snowstorms isolated the camp for days on end, and then the disappearances began. Workers would leave for their cutting areas in the morning and simply not return. Search teams were organized, but the conditions were impossible. The forest became a deadly labyrinth of deep snow and identical trees that blocked any guidance. Several men disappeared that winter and were never found. Neither their bodies nor their equipment, nor any clue as to what had happened to them. It's as if the forest had swallowed them whole. The transformation in the camp was immediate and devastating. Fear took hold like a contagious disease. Families began to see the forest no longer as their source of sustenance, but as a hostile and hungry entity. And when spring finally arrived, the decision was unanimous and swift. They would abandon Poupore. They would leave before the forest claimed more lives. And it was a desperate exodus. Families fled so quickly that they left almost everything behind. Clothes still hanging in closets, furniture intact in the houses, family photographs on the walls. It was as if they were fleeing something invisible but terrifying, something that pursued them and from which they needed to escape immediately, without time to organize belongings or plan a proper move. Today, more than 70 years later, Poupore carries a reputation that makes even the bravest explorers think twice before visiting it. Among local hunters and adventurers familiar with the region, it is known simply as the place where you can't sleep. And this is not a poetic metaphor or an exaggeration. From campfire stories, it is a documented fact, attested to by dozens of people who have tried to spend the night near the ruins. No matter how tired these people are after hours of hiking through the dense forest, no matter how comfortable their tents or sleeping bags are, they simply cannot close their eyes when they are near Poupore. It is a forced, unnatural insomnia that goes beyond any medical or psychological explanation. People describe an oppressive feeling of dread that begins as soon as the sun sets. It's as if the weight of the air changes, becoming denser, harder to breathe. And there's a disturbing awareness of being watched, not by one person or animal, but by multiple presences hidden in the impenetrable darkness of the forest. Some adventurers report hearing tapping on the trees around their tents, not random tapping caused by falling branches or animals. These are rhythmic, deliberate, methodical tappings, as if someone were using an axe or a heavy piece of wood to strike the trunks. And the most terrifying thing is that these taps come from all directions at once, creating a sonic circle around the camp, as if multiple entities were communicating through a code that no one else understands. The impact of this experience is so profound that many people who try to stay overnight at Poupore end up leaving in a hurry in the early morning, preferring to walk through the dark forest and risk getting lost rather than remain another minute in that place. There is a particularly terrifying account that perfectly illustrates the horror of Poupore. In 2019, an experienced tour guide who worked leading groups to remote areas of northern Ontario decided to personally investigate the stories about the old logging camp. He had decades of experience, had camped in literally hundreds of isolated places, and was not someone who was easily frightened. He set up his tent in the ruins of Poupore, prepared high-quality audio recording equipment, and got ready to document what really happened there during the night. What he recorded that night completely changed his mindset about what was possible in the natural world. Around 2 in the morning, his microphones picked up the unmistakable sound of dozens of axes striking trees. It was the characteristic sound of logging, that rhythmic thunk of sharp metal blades penetrating solid wood, followed by the creaking of the fibers breaking. It was as if an entire team of workers was operating there, chopping down trees in the dead of night. He grabbed his most powerful flashlight and illuminated the surrounding forest, sweeping the light between the trees, desperately searching for the source of those impossible sounds. And there was no one. The forest was completely empty. The moment the flashlight's beam touched the trees, all sounds stopped instantly. Only absolute and unsettling silence remained. He didn't wait for dawn. He dismantled his tent in the darkness, packed his equipment with trembling hands, and left Poupore before the sun rose, and he never returned. The local theory about what happens in Poupore is grim and straightforward. The workers who disappeared that deadly winter of 1954 are still there. They were never found alive, so their souls remained trapped in the forest, condemned to continue the work they were doing when they died, working eternally in the darkness, cutting down trees that no longer exist, fulfilling a routine that never ends. And they don't want to be disturbed or observed during this ghostly work. Write this down. The forest never forgets if this story left you speechless. Village 5, Klotz Lake, the village that shouldn't exist. We have now arrived at the last village on our journey, and perhaps the most unsettling of all, precisely because it challenges something fundamental about how we understand reality. All the places we have explored so far have clear historical records, documents, photographs, preserved stories, but Klotz Lake exists in a gray area between history and legend, between documented reality and persistent rumor. And here lies the real problem that makes this place unique. This village hardly appears on official maps. You can search historical archives, government records, libraries that preserve the memory of Northern Ontario, and you will find only fragmented mentions, footnotes, vague references. It was built in the 1920s as yet another logging camp, one of those that sprouted and died following the movement of the industry through the forest. But Klotz Lake was abandoned so quickly, so abruptly and completely, that many historians specializing in the region don't even know it ever existed. This lack of official documentation creates an extra layer of mystery. Why would a place be erased from the records? Was it a deliberate decision, or simply the result of decades of bureaucratic negligence? We don't know. What we do know is that today, in the place where Klotz Lake supposedly stood, only a few wooden structures remain, completely covered by the forest, absorbed by the vegetation so completely that you could pass within a few meters of them without realizing they are human constructions. And along with these almost invisible ruins, there is something far more sinister that permeates that specific patch of forest. Something that cannot be explained through maps or historical documents. People who stumble upon Klotz Lake by accident, and I must emphasize that it's almost always by accident, because it's practically impossible to find the place on purpose. Even with GPS and coordinates report an immediate transformation in the environment as soon as they enter the area. It's a visceral and instantaneous feeling of irrational fear that has no apparent cause. There are no threatening sounds, no visual signs of danger, but your entire body goes into maximum alert mode. Your primitive survival instincts begin to scream that you need to get out of there immediately. And there are objective indicators that something is fundamentally wrong in that place. Animals completely avoid the Klotz Lake area. Experienced hunters who know the movement patterns of the local fauna notice that deer, bears, even small mammals make pronounced detours around that specific region, as if there were an invisible barrier they refuse to cross. Even more disturbing is the silence. Healthy forests are noisy places, teeming with life. Birds sing, insects buzz, leaves rustle with the movement of small animals. But at Klotz Lake, there is an oppressive and unnatural silence. Birds simply don't sing there. It's as if every form of life capable of choosing consciously avoids that place. And human visitors, those few who stumble upon the ruins by chance, consistently describe the feeling of being followed by something invisible. It's not the common paranoia of being alone in the forest. It's a deep and unwavering certainty that there is an intelligent presence moving in the shadows among the trees, observing every movement, assessing, waiting. Some describe this presence as suffocating, literally feeling the air become heavier and harder to breathe the longer they stay at Klotz Lake. It's as if the atmosphere itself becomes hostile, rejecting their presence. The psychological impact is so intense that even skeptical people who don't believe in paranormal phenomena leave deeply disturbed and reluctant to talk about the experience. There is a shared revelation among all who visit the place, that there are areas in the world that simply you won't want human presence, that have developed some kind of environmental hostility that transcends rational explanations. The most terrifying account of Klotz Lake occurred in 2017 with a group of 4 experienced hikers who were exploring a remote area of the forest when they stumbled upon the ruins by pure chance. They didn't know what the place was. They hadn't heard the stories. Initially, they found it interesting to find such hidden abandoned structures and decided to camp there for the night. It was a decision they would all deeply regret. During the early morning hours, the 4 woke up simultaneously at the exact same instant, as if an invisible alarm had sounded for everyone at once, and each of them had exactly the same overwhelming feeling. They were being watched by multiple entities very close to their tents. With trembling hands, they lit their flashlights and illuminated the area around the campsite. What they saw made them flee Klotz Lake before even thinking about packing their equipment. There were dozens of footprints around their tents, barefoot footprints, clearly human, of varying sizes, forming perfect concentric circles around where they slept. But here's the detail that transformed fear into absolute terror. No one had heard anything during the night. No footsteps, no breathing, not the slightest sound of movement, and the ground there was partially damp, the kind of soil that should make a noise when stepped on. but these dozens of bare feet had moved in complete silence, forming deliberate patterns around unconscious and vulnerable people. They abandoned almost all their equipment and fled as soon as the first light of dawn began to illuminate the sky between the trees. And here's the final part that elevates Klotz Lake from terrifying to utterly inexplicable. They never managed to find the place again. They tried to return a few weeks later, with GPS marking the approximate coordinates, with detailed maps, carefully retracing the path they had taken, but they couldn't locate the ruins. It's as if Klotz Lake had simply disappeared, or perhaps it had closed itself off to them, refusing access after what happened that night. The feeling that remains is not just of a haunted or dangerous place, but of something with a will of its own, something that chooses when and to whom to reveal itself. Comment below. Some places don't want to be found if you understood the weight of this story. The feeling that remains is not just of a haunted or dangerous place, but of something with a will of its own, something that chooses when and to whom to reveal itself. Comment below. Some places don't want to be found if you understood the weight of this story. So, what do you think after everything we've explored together? Are these stories just urban legends created by fertile imaginations, or do some places truly hold echoes of the past, memories so strong that they refuse to disappear even after decades? Are there places where the boundary between what is alive and what is gone is so tenuous that the two realities blend in ways that our rational mind cannot fully process? If you've stayed with me this far, until the end of this journey through the most haunted villages in northern Ontario, it means you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. You're not looking for superficial entertainment. You want to truly delve into the mysteries the world still holds. You want to understand the behind-the-scenes aspects of what most people prefer to ignore. So, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos, because I continue investigating these forgotten places, these stories that deserve to be told, these mysteries that defy explanation. And leave a like on the video, because that shows me that the connection we created over these minutes is real, that it's worth continuing to bring this kind of content to you. Now, tell me in the comments, write I watched until the end, so I know who really followed this whole story. And since we're talking, would you have the courage to visit any of these abandoned villages? Or maybe you know some sinister story from Canada, some haunted place that I should investigate. Share it below, because many of the best stories on this channel came from suggestions from the community. And look, there's a video right here that perfectly complements this topic, exploring other abandoned places that hold even deeper mysteries. Click and continue with me there, because this journey is only just beginning. Just remember one thing, some places were left behind for a very specific reason. Perhaps, just perhaps, it's best to leave them in peace and simply observe them from afar through these stories. Until the next exploration, if you have the courage to return.